over the course of history, we've noticed a evolution of sorts when it comes to the field of terrorism and terrorists who participate in these acts. Everybody is familiar with the known terrorists of our age: Osama bin Laden, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, Muhammad Atta. But as we go past the 40-year mark, many people don't realize that there was a sort of godfather of terrorism, a terrorism that during his day was never seen before. His name was Abu Nidal. Abu Nidal was born in Palestine, in Jaffa, the city of Jaffa, and he is considered a mercenary. It's very hard to describe him, as he is usually by his associates and those who knew him intimately as a shy person, but very affable, aggressive, but very lenient. And so it wouldn't surprise me if he was a manipulating type of sociopathic personality. It would fit him. Abu Nidal was somebody who is considered a voyeur when it comes to the field of terrorism. He himself hardly participated, but his faction, in which he grew out of, molded him into a very demonic type of personality. I hate to use that word as I'm a secularist, but I think it fits his persona. In regards to the terrorist campaign that he was primarily responsible for throughout the late 70s and early 80s, he became just as popular as Osama bin Laden, if not more so, in a very short frame of time. Nidal, however, was not as globally threatening as bin Laden, in which I'll describe in just a little bit further along in the video. But for now, many people aren't aware of what Abu Nidal had done, and his terrorist campaign has done, not just for the Middle East, but for the world renown. And he was primarily responsible for many acts. One of them was the United States bombing of Libya in 1986. Black September, Pan Am Flight 73, which four gunmen hijacked in 1986. He also had financed a banking account at the infamous Bank and Credit of Commerce, the BCCI Bank, which was a company that had many nefarious individuals who held accounts there for money laundering or to hide funding, drug laundering as well. The CIA had many accounts here under false names. So did the Medellin cartel, which is a drug cartel in Colombia. He was also responsible for the Hindawi affair, which is the bodies of teachers that were found. One of them was Anne Marie Murphy, who's an Irish chambermaid, and she was killed with a Semtex bomb that was found in one of her bags with a false bottom. The Shlomo Argov assassination. Shlomo Argov, who was an Israeli ambassador to Britain, and I'll just read out a general statement in which he was assassinated on June 3rd, 1982 by an Abu Nidal operative named Hussein Ghassani Saeed, who shot Argov. Argov, however, I'm sorry, he wasn't assassinated. He was gravely wounded. He survived, and he spent 3 months in a coma, but he was disabled throughout the rest of his life, and he died in 2003. However, what was important about this attempted assassination was that Ariel Sharon, who was the Israeli defense minister, responded 3 days later by invading Lebanon. And the reason why he invaded Lebanon was because the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, headed by Yasser Arafat, was based in Lebanon. The Israeli government had been preparing to invade, but they needed a pretext. And with this attempted assassination, Abu Nidal actually gave Israel a pretext to do it. However, there is a quote by Der Spiegel, who interviewed Abu Nidal in October of 1985, and Abu Nidal actually stated that he was not behind the attempted assassination, but he did relate something very interesting, and I'll read you the quote. Quote, "What Arafat says about me doesn't bother me. Not only he, but also a whole list of Arab and world politicians who claim that I am an agent of the Zionists or the CIA. Others state that I am a mercenary of the French Secret Service or of the Soviet KGB. The latest rumor is that I am an agent of Khomeini, Iranian Mullah or Khomeini. During a certain period, they said we were spies for the Iraqi regime. Now they say that we are Syrian agents. Many psychologists and sociologists in the Soviet bloc tried to investigate this man, Abu Nidal. They wanted to find a weak point in my character. The result was zero." End quote. Now, Abu Nidal, it was later found out through documents and files in the late 21st century that Nidal actually was a mercenary for many countries. He went where the money was at, whether it be Spain, Germany, Lebanon, Iraq, Israel, the United States, all funded Nidal in one way or another. And it sounds familiar. That's exactly what they did with the Mujahideen later in 1979 in Afghanistan. They also did this in 2007 when, 2012, when the CIA actually financed the Islamic State in an operation called Timber Sycamore, which was a covert operation in which the Obama administration allowed the CIA to fund and train the Islamic State to help overthrow the Bashar Assad government in Syria. And don't be surprised when you find out that the intelligence services, much like the CIA, who use these enemies of the state to perform actions that would be beneficial for its foreign policy. It happens all the time. Another incident, which I will get into, but a little bit before this incident, to explain about Abu Nidal. Abu Nidal was part of the PLO, but he was dismayed about the Palestinian Liberation Organization and Arafat, considering them that they were too lenient in regards to conducting operations against the Israelis and how they're treating the Palestinian people. The PLO was created so that it could create foreign policy dialogue with people around the world. And they were getting a lot of headway during the mid-1970s, early 80s. In fact, many people were inviting Arafat, including the United States, Canada, Argentina, Australia, to come speak about what is happening in the Israeli-Palestine conflict. And so Nidal actually created his own group called Fatah, F-A-T-A-H. Fatah is actually a paramilitary group that was responsible for all these attacks I just outlined. And what they did was they helped create this militant organization to attack Israeli interests and American interests, mainly Western coalition interests. What it did ultimately was condemn the PLO along with it, because Nidal actually was part of the PLO at one point. And so this global response to Arafat's PLO began to falter because of Nidal. In regards to the evolution of terrorism, throughout the 1970s, we noticed that there were sporadic hijackings, airline piracy hijacking, regarding the group Hezbollah. One person that comes to mind is Imad Mugniya, who was the commander of military operations for Hezbollah later, who was assassinated later on by Israeli and CIA operatives. That information actually came from one Ali Al-Jarrah. And if that name sounds familiar to you, Ali Al-Jarrah is the uncle to alleged hijacker pilot of United Airlines Flight 93, Ziad Jarrah. Ali Al-Jarrah was a spy for Israel for 25 years, and he was a spy against Hezbollah operatives, as well as Hamas and Arab interests in Lebanon. He was paid quite handsomely for his 25 years of service, and he was arrested, actually. And so, going back to this evolution of terrorism, what we never saw was that with hijackings during this period of between 1977 to 1983 or 4, hijackings were basically political. You would have people from either Hezbollah that would hijack a plane, and that they would land it somewhere, and they would offer that, or they would profess that they would want something in return, maybe somebody out of jail, maybe a group of Palestinians who were falsely arrested to be released, maybe to force Israel to alleviate the biased or prejudicial political pressures against the Palestinians regarding how they treat them, and so on. It could be a myriad of objectives here. And it also could be about the United States and how they are too one-sided when it comes to their affiliations regarding the Middle East. In fact, the United States allies are basically, as you could say, probably anti-Muslim. Saudi Arabia with the Wahhabi ideology, Israel with the Zionist nationalist ideology, to an extent Pakistan when it comes to the ISI and how they create and fund Islamic and terrorist organizations who are not basically Islamic. They are basically theocratic or extremist, ultra-Orthodox, which are contradictory to moderate Sunni beliefs and Shia beliefs. And so what we saw regarding Abu Nidal, he basically evolved from hijacking airplanes to conducting more fanatical operations. And one operation in which I will speak about is the 1985 Roman Vienna airport attacks. And I'll just give you a general rundown. On December 27th, 1985, at approximately 9:15 a.m., 4 Arab males approached the ticket counter of Israelis El Al Airlines and Trans World Airlines at Leonardo da Vinci Airport in Rome, Italy. One man dipped into his coat pocket, took out a hand grenade, and launched it at a group of 5 to 10 people who were talking in a circle. The grenade exploded, and it caused, if you're not familiar with how a grenade explodes, go watch a video at close quarters. It's really ear-piercing. And this causes like a daze. If you're not gravely injured from the shrapnel or from the blast, your ears are going to pop and bleed. So it leaves you in a state of submission or frozen state of mind. And while they're in this state of mind, another Arab man came behind him and began lobbing more grenades and started shooting people with a submachine gun. And this caused complete panic and horror, and everyone started running away. They started hiding behind the seats in the waiting area. They went to the bathrooms, and multiple acts of violence was happening while this was transpiring. At about the same time, a group of Arab men had entered the Vienna International Airport in Vienna, Austria. And this time there was 3 men. And they ran, they got out of the car, and right outside the car, the airport's right there. So there's no like waiting room, and then you get to the airport, there's the tarmac. So it's right there. So they ran right inside the doorway. Immediately, same method of attack. They threw grenades, started shooting into crowds of people, shooting people at the check-in for a flight to Tel Aviv, and they killed 2 people instantly in this flurry, in this initial onslaught. Austrian police, however, responded because they were actually inside the airport, and they responded with a fierce volley of about approximately like 50 bullets, because they had machine guns as well. And it was 2 El Al security officers. Approximately at the end of this volley, approximately 200 rounds, which is absurd amount of discharge. The men escaped into an awaiting car just 50 feet away from the airport. Meanwhile, security and police at the Trans World Airlines in Rome began repelling the attackers who caused more carnage than these 3. And the morbid scenario would create a final exchange of gunfire, one that would give victory to the police. The police killed them. 3 men lay dead, 1 wounded, and that wounded person who was involved was Mohammed Sharam. At the Trans World Airlines in Rome, the number of the people who were killed was 16, with 99 wounded, which was a horrific attack at the time, really obscene, because this never happened before, where a terrorist attack happened inside an airport. At the Vienna airport, 3 people were killed and 39 were wounded. All in all, 19 people were killed and 139 were wounded. Many people who lived gave personal accounts. One was Shari Roof, who was a student from New York City, and I'll read you the quote. "There were people falling to the ground, others screaming. I felt a burning in my right leg. I collapsed to the floor. It was an inferno. They started throwing hand grenades and firing with submachine guns. We all threw ourselves to the ground. Blood spread all over the floor. I fell on the body of a girl, and a grenade splinter hit me in the face." End quote. Now, the carnage and violence were unprecedented. This never happened anywhere in the world before. And what Abu Nidal did was the pretext of terrorism regarding airlines and the airline industry. It was a new form of terrorism, one that would have a lasting effect in the human community for all of time. But after the attacks, Arafat actually denied the accusations that he was involved, because the media right away posted to their newspapers that the PLO was behind it and that he would be blamed. In fact, he was. It was later revealed by one organization about why they executed this scenario. Abu Nidal took actual full responsibility, and he didn't deny that the PLO was behind it. And I think that was the reason, so they could drag the PLO into this terrorist organization, which they never were to begin with. Now, Nidal did explain about why he conducted these attacks. And Nidal claimed the attacks on the airports and the Israeli ticket counters were in retaliation for Operation Wooden Leg. And Operation Wooden Leg was carried out by Israeli military forces on PLO headquarters in Tunisia just 2 months prior to these attacks. And Nidal would be the most wanted man in the world at this point. He was before, but after this really put him on the face of the map. What would come out of this terrorist attack, and what would come out of Nidal's mindset regarding this attack? What did he do to forever alter terrorism? Because after this, we saw heightened security at airports. In fact, because of this attack, the FAA gradually started implementing armed security in airports in the United States. Even though this didn't happen in the United States, it happened abroad, but it gave a heightened sense of awareness. Sounds familiar? 9/11, Bin Laden, right? Or allegedly Bin Laden. And so when I talk about the evolution of terrorism, because what comes after this? Well, instead of hijacking airplanes, instead of attacking and killing people inside the airports, now the next step of terrorism, evolutionary terrorism, is hijacking airplanes and crashing them to create a wider range of fatalities, where the message would resoundingly be clear, as if these weren't clear. The extremist measures performed by these terrorist operatives would become the apex of what the 9/11 attacks were about. And what we saw was, in the early data that we could report regarding airliners being used as weapons instead of using airliners to hijack and conduct demands regarding whether it be foreign policy or a lack of campaigns, military campaigns against the Arab community. Now the message is clear. Now we'll take the airplanes and crash them into high-valued targets. In 1994, we saw the first instances of using planes as the weapon. And if we are to go by the information which was used to prosecute Abdul Hakim Murad, who was involved with the Bojinka operation, but the Bojinka plot actually was the pretext for the 9/11 attacks. Abdul Hakim Murad was a licensed pilot. In 1995, he professed, and let's just take this with a grain of salt, because we're just going by Murad's word, in his testimony to the Philippines National Police, in which he was arrested regarding in the middle of the Bojinka plot, he tells the Philippine National Police that there are Arab operatives inside the United States who are trying to learn how to fly planes. This much is true because, according to FBI informants, in which I reiterated in yesterday's video, Henry Allen, I forgot the other guy's name, who reported to the Phoenix field office regarding Arabs trying to fly planes and crash them into buildings. But the FBI basically ignored this information. Abdul Hakim Murad actually told his investigator, Rodolfo Mendoza, who was leading the investigation into Bojinka plot, he tells him that in Bojinka operation, not only were they to plant 12 bombs on airplanes to have them all explode, there was to be one hijacking that was to have the pilot hijacker crash the plane at CIA Langley headquarters. This was the first time that we had an actual operative willing to strike a U.S. target using a plane. A year prior to this, we actually saw the Algerian Islamic group hijack Air France 8959, and their intentions were to crash that plane into the Eiffel Tower. And so what I'm saying is that you could see the slow mechanisms or the slow evolution, this evolutionary process of terrorism regarding how they would use airplanes and how they would conduct terrorist operations, where it became more of a political front. Now, this is mainly about conducting mass casualties with a political message. Every single terrorist campaign that has ever happened inside the United States, whether it be the Bojinka Plot, which was a failed plot, the Landmarks Plot, a failed plot, the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, the USS Cole bombing, the 9/11 attacks. They all had some kind of political pretext to it. And it wasn't basically what the State Department told us regarding that they hated our freedoms. These are Islamic fundamentalists. That's a general term, a broad term, and it's false. These people aren't pious Muslims. These are Arab criminals who are using this anomaly that grew out of Sunni theology called Wahhabi Islam, which is not Islamic in the pious term or the theological term. It is basically an ultra extremist interpretation of the text of Ibn al-Taymiyyah or Ibn al-Hanbal or Hanbali. These are people who are authoritarians in the Hadiths and not the Quran. And so these political aspirations are basically simple. It is basically the United States close and inexplicably intertwined political affiliations with the State of Israel. And it's prejudicial to the Arab community at whole, because if you read earlier documents such as the Oded Yunin Plan, or if you go by the Zionist motivations as well as the neoconservative think tanks, Project for New American Century, which is basically allotted for the Pentagon, which is affiliated with our foreign policy at times, not all the time. But you'll see this link between the military industrial complex and the Israeli United States coalition regarding foreign policy. And it's not basically Israel itself. We're talking about the Zionist government itself, which is a nationalist fanatic group. I'm not going to be dissuaded from holding back on that. They're fanatics. And you have a lot of Israelis inside Israel who can't stand, Benjamin Netanyahu, for example. He's a crook. He's a criminal. Should be tried at The Hague, along with Bush and Obama. But you get to understand what I'm talking about regarding terrorists like Ramzi Youssef, Osama bin Laden, Abu Nidal, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. All these people, and I'm not absolving them of what they've done. They're criminals. These people deserve, to be put away for the rest of their lives or killed. They're murderers. They're sociopaths, psychopaths. Okay? But you have to listen to the message that they're telling the United States. And none so more than what Ramzi Youssef told before he was sentenced for his participation in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, in which he told the judge, before he was sentenced to, I think, 260 years, that you're the terrorists, the United States. You're the terrorists. You're the ones who bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You're the terrorists who killed and slaughtered thousands of the American Indians, 500,000 Iraqis with your economic sanctions. Well, guess what? That much is true. And whether we helped facilitate the mindsets of these terrorists in a certain way, we certainly did, with our very detrimental foreign policy regarding not just Israel, but with Saudi Arabia as well, and Pakistan, and Egypt. And if you take a look at all these countries I'm telling you about, you'll understand that they have a very close link to allow these terrorist events and why they happened in the first place, and how the intelligence apparatuses basically use the information that they collect through either human intelligence or signals intelligence and manipulate these groups and individuals, and basically sometimes allow these operations to continue to further a greater agenda, which is basically surrounded on two areas, the Pentagon and our foreign policy, which is detrimental to this very day, not just to us, the American people, who are victims of a global outrage, but to the Middle East as well. How many millions of Arabs have been killed? How many Muslims have been slaughtered? In Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, in Syria, in the Sudan, and of course the big one, Iran. So I think I'm going to end it there and talk about, in the end of the two subjects of Abu Nidal and the Rome Vienna airport attacks, the evolution of terrorism. And that's basically what we saw. And what comes after the September 11th attacks, I don't know. I just hope there isn't any more. But if we leave it to the imagination, who knows what could be next or what could be in store. We just have to, as a community, act responsibly in regards to our studies, in regards to how we conduct ourselves, not become Islamophobes or Jew bashers, prejudice because a certain faction of government or a certain intelligence agency that is not acting in our best interests, and not to generalize certain countries for what a small but powerful faction of government is doing in our name. What we have to do is act responsibly in conducting research and to show our outrage by educating people about what's really happening in the world. And what's happening in the world is happening in our name, because it starts with us, the United States. And that's why I'll continue to post as many videos as I can, and hopefully they are educational for you.